In the last video, we asked, what does the tragedy of the commons have to do with planning and designing our cities? Our cities are not exactly commons, but they are full of resources that are created by our collective actions: space, proximity, density, job opportunities, and so on. Some people put more cows to graze in the field than others. That is, they use more common resources than others, and in doing so, they often produce prosperity to others through economic activity. But they also create negative externalities, such as pollution, congestion, lack of space, and so on. And these negative externalities are shared by us all. There are several examples of how the urban commons are used irrationally, almost to exhaustion. Look at what happened when China and Hong Kong could not agree on who would regulate a small piece of land in Hong Kong that legally belonged to China. Because of lack of clear regulation, people could build as much as they wanted or as much as they physically could. The most important common resource there, space, was quickly exhausted. Kowloon City, walled city has since been demolished and is now a park in that area. But there are other examples of irrational use of resources. Other examples of irrational use of resources include, for example, the use of private cars. We all love the comfort given by our cars, but when everybody decides to take advantage of the roads at the same time, we have pollution and congestion that affect everybody in the city. Balancing the positive effects of economic activity and the negative externality produced by actors is a big task for spatial planning, whose objectives are to distribute the burdens and benefits of urban development fairly, creating good cities for all. But is rational choice theory true? Or is it true all the time? Are we destined to consume all our resources without regard for the well-being of others and of future generations? Well, we will find answers in the work of two women, Elinor Ostrom and Patsy Healy, among many others. Let's start with Ostrom, the first woman to win a Nobel Prize for Economics for her ideas on the governance of the commons. By studying the governance of common resources by traditional peoples, like the Australian Aborigines pictured here, she concluded that traditional societies usually did a much better job in governing those resources and distributing the burdens and benefits of human activity. Based on her observations, Ostrom came up with a few principles that generally allowed for better governance of the commons: symmetric communication, subsidiarity, and polycentric governance. In other words, members of a community should have a voice in the governance of the commons. Decisions should be taken at the lowest level where they have an effect, and common resources should be governed by different bodies or different groups at different levels, sometimes in small competition with each other. Patsy Healy is one of the luminaries of spatial planning theory and a strong proponent of communicative theory in planning. For Healy and others, one of the jobs of planning is to reconstruct the meaning of a democratic practice based in practices of inclusionary argumentation. These ideas can be traced to communicative theory and the German philosopher Jürgen Habermas. For Healy, Habermas shows us that we are not autonomous subjects competitively pursuing our individual preferences, as in the example of the tragedy of the commons, but that our sense of ourselves and of our interests is constituted through our relations with others, through communicative practices. For this reason, Healy and others put a lot of emphasis on communicative practices in planning. This means an emphasis on participation of all members of a community, including those whose voices are silent or whose knowledge is considered unimportant. By doing this, we can take stock of the needs of very diverse groups and can plan our cities accordingly, avoiding, hopefully, the tragedy of the commons. This is very close to the idea of the right to the city, in which citizens are able and free to shape their cities and communities to their needs, wishes, and desires. It is the right to participate in the governance of the city. Einstein well observed in 1969 that citizen participation presents us with many, many challenges, and there are various degrees of citizen participation, ranging from citizen control and empowerment to tokenism and manipulation. What can we conclude from the governance of the commons? It seems clear we need citizen empowerment and participation in public debate that is fair and democratic, so we can decide together how to use our resources to ensure the basic right of every human being. Citizen empowerment and participation have the potential to create a public sphere in which the conditions for good governance of the commons, as described by Ostrom, can exist and produce more just outcomes, helping solve conflicts in spatial development, balancing powers in governance processes, increasing accessibility to public goods, and ultimately delivering more social spatial justice. Spatial planning is a form of public reasoning. This goes in the direction of what Ostrom, Healy, and many, many others say about communication and participation. There are certainly new roles for planners and designers in this perspective. What is your role?